Haxan Cloak.
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Haxan Cloak LP, Excavation. This is the sophomore full-length LP from this UK-based musical project. Its self-titled full-length album came out in 2011. This new record is out now on Triangle Records, a label that specializes in the dark, the moody, the atmospheric, through artists like Balam Akib, as well as Clams Casino, Evian Christ, even Vessel, whose last full-length LP I reviewed pretty recently. And the label is kind of picky, only choosing a handful of different artists for its roster, and all of them sort of bringing their own unique brand or flair to these moods, these vibes that the label sort of specializes in. And certainly the Haxan Cloak has no problems meeting these needs on this new full-length album. Just look at the title. If this album is an excavation, certainly the Haxan Cloak gets very low. It gets subterranean. I haven't heard electronic music, or at least electronically tinged music, this frightening since some of Lustmord's best albums. I also would not be surprised if the Haxan Cloak took a lot of influence from horror movie soundtracks on this LP. And I don't just mean the music that may be composed for a horror movie soundtrack. I'm talking about like the gargantuan bass hits and the very sharp, jump out in your face noises that appear in about every modern horror movie trailer. This is essentially the opening track of this album in a nutshell. Like I said earlier, this album is essentially dark ambient music. It lasts for about an hour, stretched across 9 tracks. A lot of the tracks on this LP are incredibly vast and tall and wide, thanks to the incredible reverb that the Haxan Cloak employs on this album, but many of the songs are beat-driven as well, which does give these tracks pace, does give them direction. A lot of the tracks on this LP, though, don't really rise in a way that is traditionally exciting in music. The Haxan Cloak kind of prefers to hang down in the deep, bassy murk of low-end frequencies. This album is so dark at times you can't even see your hand in front of your face, which is also a description I threw at the Vessel album that I also reviewed on Triangle Records. But the Haxan Cloak is much more obsessed with low frequencies than high, creating rumbles, creating fuzz, a physical experience with the music. That feeling definitely comes through on parts 1 and 2 of the title track on this LP, the first of which features all of these sputtering, clicking, very busy electronics matched up against some very eerie and bassy atmospheric tones. The second part of this title track has all these kind of metallic waves of sound repeating and just cycling over and over and over. It's like an industrial anaconda, and the song eventually gives way to some very beautiful synthesizer arpeggios. The Haxan Cloak sort of tossing very sparse moments of beauty at the listener, matched up with just this grimness. The horror movie soundplay gets intensified on the next 2 tracks of this LP, starting with Mara. These massive drum hits, and I mean massive, are pulsating throughout the track. Huge piano hits on this song as well from the low end of the pitch spectrum. And these wailing strings coming like the strings creep like drips of blood coming down the wall of the horrible torture chamber that all of these sounds are clearly coming from. The song leaps right into the track MISTE, which starts off with a voice that literally jumps out at the listener like a knife-wielding psycho. The song has this dragging double bass line. It sounds like a horrible fog lurching out from some kind of creepy forest. And the way the vocal that popped up right at the start of this track is edited and placed throughout the song in this sort of skippy, strange way. It's kind of creative, odd, and very memorable. There is more appeal to this LP, though, than being completely creeped out. Though being creeped out will be the most obvious reaction to have when listening to this. But let me say this, if the sounds on this album weren't crafted amazingly well, and if the songs weren't sort of built and paced in a way that kept them engaging and interesting, these creepy feelings wouldn't necessarily even come about in the first place. It's the very last song on this album, though, that feels kind of like a legitimate change of pace. The synth melody comes through that is actually pretty serene, and in comparison to a lot of the other stuff on this LP, is kind of uplifting. The song grows very dark and very cold over a slow period of time, though. The song is 12 freaking minutes long. But as it gets darker and heavier, with some very eerie strings and some double bass and a very heavy bass drum. The slow, very basic, and over the course of the song, boring beat actually wears the song's welcome out really fast. The song slowly decays into staleness over its 12-minute runtime, unfortunately. The most obvious downsides to this LP is that there are some moments that drag on and don't have an incredible amount of musical detail or just sonic detail in them. It seems like the Haxan Cloak gets more joy out of the space left than space filled, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. Certainly it helps along with the very potent and amazing vibe that is conjured on this album, but it does keep some of these tracks from being engaging throughout. On the flip side of this complaint, there are some songs on here, most notably the ones around the 3-minute mark, that just feel too short, half-baked, kind of underdeveloped, like they could have gone on longer or evolved into something else. Still, these problems only reflect a minority of tracks on this album. As is, this album is incredible when it comes to sound play and just pulling a very strong emotional reaction from me. There are moments where I do wish the sonic palette was a little wider and that the Haxan Cloak found different sounds and different textures to sort of bring more variety, and that the structures and the rhythms behind these tracks weren't quite so basic. But man, is this album like an experience. I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this LP. If you've given it a listen, what do you think of it? Do you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. The Haxan Cloak, Excavation, forever.